And we are back to the stage of destiny. This is episode 43 of the Lyrical Ones podcast. And that was me butchering what we would call Soul Calibur, the first one on Dreamcast, the intro. Welcome back to the stage of destiny. Now, yes, every day is a stage for destiny, every day. So, this is episode 43. I am your host. So appreciative, filled with so much gratitude to be present, to be here. And as per usual, Affluent, how are you doing?
Doing wonderful. It's Wednesday. We on the last day of March. Um, we're a year removed from the beginning of a period in our lives in the world um, where things took a shift. There's a lot of good that can be said came from this time of stillness and quiet, and at the same time, there's a lot of hurt and harm and loss to be paired with that gain. And I'm in a space right now where I'm acknowledging that the small things, the smallest of things, the little bit, the littlest, the most minute aspect of happiness can keep one from being overwhelmed. Uh, I guess for a long time, I've spent my life listening to music in languages that I don't understand. And and I think sometimes there there were moments where I was listening to music in English that I didn't understand the scope, right? And music has always been something that has opened up a window um, into someone, the artist, the writer's perspective. And before we talk about that in particular, uh, how's your week going so far?
So far. So far. Honestly, I can't I'm enjoying this week. I'm enjoying it because I'm focusing on things that have a lot to do with my future me and what I hold myself to, mainly music, around the realm of music. That's been my week. That's where I'm focused at. Is just focusing on that because yeah, it's necessary for me right now. It's super important that I'm able to do what's not needed to be done because yeah, it's we talk about so many different topics, so many different things, and one thing that always comes through is the need for the ability, right? The need for the ability to take ownership over your life. Because what we'll talk about, right, has to tie into that. Everything's tying into that. And, this week is importantly like it's just that focus, that eagerness, that willingness to do what needs to be done. Cause it's beyond time to do so much. And yeah, I mean,
Okay, yeah, I mean that it's definitely like beyond time, right? It's like always due for action, right? Sometimes like rest is an action, right? And sometimes action is a little bit more active. Um, and being passive is a choice, right? Being aggressive is a choice, right? Being passive aggressive is a choice, right? It's like, are you? We can always ask ourselves, self, am am I being passive, right, with an intention of growth, or am I being passive aggressive with my future, right? Am I being aggressive with my future? Like, am I doing what's necessary for that future self, for that future situation, Um, like that's why goal setting is important, because if we can work the plan backwards, we can figure out step one, right? It's like if you know that there is a finish line somewhere, in a certain direction, you can start to put one foot in front of the other. And you may not know the route, but every race is won the same way, right? By placing one foot in the front of the other. And like no race starts without a starting line, right? A starting point. And as we like take ownership of where we are and where we would like to be, we have to look at our voice, right? And say, am I expressing my needs? Am I aware of my needs? Am I rejecting or accepting those needs? And then am I addressing those needs once they're accepted? And is my approach aggressive, right? Is it passive aggressive? Is it passive, right? Am I looking at the plan and saying this is going to get me where I would like to go? And sometimes folks are just passive aggressive, say I'm gonna just get this job and I'm gonna work this job for a minute and I'm gonna get this 401k, or I'm gonna get these benefits, and it's gonna be a placeholder for what I would like to do. And what happens is folks get comfortable with the placeholder, thinking, oh well, I just found some comfort, right? I'm just getting this check. I'm able to feed, we're able to pay my bills, got sustenance, right? Like I'm good. I got time to be social. I got time to look after relationships, and then forget that the placeholder position was exactly that, right? You still got to go around the monopoly board another time. You can't just stop at the boardwalk and chill. Say, well, the boardwalk is comfortable, like it's fresh, like, and right. It's not about necessarily gathering things, um, but the position you're in. You say, well, am I there because it's safe, or am I there because it's where I want to be, right? Because them is not always the same thing, right? It's like sometimes the thing that's safe is uncomfortable and seems dangerous and threatening, and where you want to be can be harmful, dangerous, toxic, and disruptive. But with that voice, right? When you like a creative, when you're a writer, a poet, a singer, a musician, like when you find that voice, like especially like the illustrator, like whatever it is, right? The way that you communicate, when you find what that is, right? Then you can start to pull those things out of the head, out of your head, out of your heart, and say, okay, well, actually, the space or the amount of intensity or energy that I was given to this thing is actually too much. It's actually not a big idea. It's actually not something that I care about so much, that is now so important to me, right? And this thing over here that I wasn't given a lot of energy to is actually something that I need a lot more time with, that I need to spend more time with. And we see that like in interacting with people, with friendships, with relationships, with jobs, with family. Say, well, maybe I'm not as close as I could be to my cousins, or maybe I'm not as close as I could be to my siblings. Right? Maybe I'm spending too a lot of time with my friends, and people find out, oh well, my friends ain't really in it for the long haul. And then the long haul starts to um, reveal itself, and folks start to disappear, and an energy that could have been given to you know bigger hearts, more intentional hearts, or bonds, right, can fall by the wayside. And this happens in microcosms and in jobs and friendships, right? We're like temporary acquaintances, like whatever, right? Um, Sometimes even with a project, right? Even with a song, we're like, oh man, well, I started something and it's like I really want, like my ego wants me to like finish this project, but maybe I need to leave this here, right? And then circle back to it later. But if I don't write out the other things, right, if I don't get everything out of my head, right, then they all sit on top of each other like this, and the tension or the pressure makes everything seem important. Everything that's in my head, everything that I'm thinking about, right, is all accessible, right, in an instant, in a thought, in a millisecond. And they all seem important at the time because I can get from one to the other instantly. And the energy or the emotion that's attached to one thing that's really, really big and important to me can then carry on to instantly to the next thing. And then it seems like these four things that I just thought about in the last hour are really, really important to me. And it might have just been the one thing that just then carried this emotion and energy to these other three things. And it's like being in an ER room, being in triage, and you're saying, okay, what deserves my sense of urgency, right? Like, what do I need to do? What do we need to do to save this patient to keep them alive first? And then we'll go to the next thing, right? Because if we miss the most important thing, then we won't be able to do everything else. So if we pick the wrong thing, if I start with the wrong step, I'm going to miss out on being able to do all this other stuff that's on my heart, right? If I start with the wrong step, then I'm going to lose out on things that are important to me that will again, right, make me feel alive before before I get a chance to really experience those things. And I'm in this space where like, okay, my voice like matters, but not necessarily for people, right? Just for self, right? So I can be better for people, so I can be better in community, so I can be better in interaction. It's like I need to say like, okay, why did I respond that way? Right? Why did I say that? Was it a reaction or was it a response? And then if I'd have just took some more time and just like spread out those thoughts and emotions, like I said, well, actually, I really only needed to say this and this, right? I just need to say a few things. I need to say all of this, right? I didn't really. This is not really what was important. Actually, maybe just this was really just the only important thing, right? Just these few ideas was like the important thing, right? It's like if y'all listening just on the audio right now, I was doing these hand gestures, but like if you got 10 things that come to your mind when an incident happens or a conversation happens and something emotionally activates you, um, and 10 things come to your mind, and if you react instead of respond, sometimes you'll be trying to say in almost like word vomit these 10 things in an interaction with someone. And if you take the time to respond instead and triage your emotions, you can just say, well, actually, the most important thing that I communicate is just this one thing, right? Of how maybe how I'm affected, right? Right? How it makes me feel, and then like the need that is met or not met in this moment, right? Like I don't necessarily need to like go into these 10 things that come into my head. Maybe I just needed to communicate a few things. And sometimes I think we get that way with projects, with music, with art. We get that way in our careers. We get that way in trying to like find financial stability. We get that way when we're trying to find a partner. We like, oh, I want to get this box checked, this box checked, this box checked, this box checked, and we need to like triage and say, what are the most important things, and then what are the things that I may be making a big deal out of, or maybe it's just something that not as important. So I think like right now I'm in a space where like this, the my voice and my gratitude and just like the small little bit of happiness will keep me from like feeling like I can't triage. It's an emergency. I'm overwhelmed. I'm drowning. Like instead, I can say, well, if I spent the time counting my breaths, I wouldn't have time to count what was going wrong in my life. If I took if I counted that, like I'd be too busy counting how much I'm breathing. And so if I start there, then I can start to see other things that are good, and I can kind of battle back from life coming at me and overwhelming me.
You brought up a good point. You brought up a good point. It's like the hierarchy of needs, right?
Yep.
Like thinking of how do you prioritize your necessities? What do you need? And and when you said all that, it reminded me of this moment. Maybe some can relate, maybe some can't. I had a friend tell me about a friend they lost due to a road rage incident, right? There was a situation, things got out of control, merging lane, people mad and angry, someone gets killed in this process, right? And it so happened to be a friend of a friend, right? And they tell me about it, and it was like, wait, what? And it made me rethink of how do I show up when I drive? Do I continue to get mad when something happens, or do I continue to be like, or do I change, right? Do I continue to get mad and react, or do I stop and process what's going on, right? And people will be like, "Oh, you a sucker, you a sucker, you gonna back down, da da da," and it's like, what's my priority? Is my priority to get to the destination, or is it to challenge every time I get challenged, right? Is it to push back every time I get nudged? And recently, I had to take a trip. I had to take a like little nice little long 45-minute drive. And usually certain things happen along the drive, right? We talking about San
Hold
Francisco
on.
Bay
Hey,
Area.
hold on. Ain't that wild? That 45 minutes right now is a long drive. Like
I mean, it used to be just a
pan,
drive. Like I just gotta go where I gotta go.
big
You're right.
right, big city or right pandemic, whatever it is. Like 45 minutes is like it used to be all right.
It used to be
It
all
was
right. Yeah, you're
cool.
right. It was just a quick trip. But now I'm like, now that I've gotten so used to not driving, 45 minutes is back to like, oh man. It reminds me the first trip I took out to Pittsburgh when I was young in a car. I was like, this is forever. This is forever. As time progresses, of course, it's just like 38-minute drive, 30-minute, depending on if you know how to move quickly, right? But in this instance, I'm like, you know what? I'm hitting traffic. I'm gonna have to deal with some things. It's gonna be 45 minutes. And to me, in the moment, I'm like way different. But before this, I was still reacting. I was still reactionary. And life events happened that reinforce things that I was trying to adopt. People will say things to you and you don't know you like it, but you don't adopt it. You don't try to own it. You don't try to find a way to have it take shape in your life, right? You hear things, right? You motivational speaker, a preacher, a teacher, whoever. They're gonna say something that's gonna hit you and you're gonna be like, yes, but will you adopt it? Will you find a way to make it yours? And I did that more than enough, right? I'm a rapper. I love making music. I love helping people. I love being a part of my community. I love these things because those things hold value to me, not to everyone, just to me. And they make me feel happy. And I cherish and I appreciate my happiness. I appreciate things that give me a sense of joy. So I lean on those things or I head in those directions. Doesn't mean I'm flawless, doesn't mean it happens every time. And you hear things that reinforce your joy. You hear things that help support you go into your joy. And so I remember my friend told me that, and it was like maybe about 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And it wasn't until this past drive that it hit where I was like, everybody, I need to just be me in this moment. I just need to be still. I need to take it in and not react and not jump at and not get angry. Cause it's like even in an instance, oh, I'm just gonna be stuck. I'm just gonna hit the gas. Not every situation calls for it, especially when it's aggression, especially when it's anger, especially when it's reactionary based off of someone else. I'm letting all these things impact me. I'm not being authentic to my joy. I'm not being authentic to what I need. I'm not being in tune with what I need, right? I'm changing my need based off of the situation instead of adapting to the situation to incorporate my needs. And you talk about people who will, what I call pacify, right? This is what society has for me, and I want to have some security. So instead of fighting for the security, right? And there's so many reasons why. There's so many reasons. I'm not trying to minimize or dismiss why, because maybe you didn't grow up with someone to show you grit, discipline, or perseverance, right? Maybe you didn't understand adversity and how to overcome it, right? Some people get taken out by adversity. Some people, then certain situations become uncomfortable, and then you're looking for and seeking comfort, right? And that doesn't mean that the comfort is sustainable. It's just maybe it's instant gratification. Maybe it's something to just, give you a
Maybe
moment
it's
to finesse over.
the fluoride in the tap water,
Maybe it's the fluoride in the tap water, right? Maybe,
making people docile.
right? Maybe, who knows, right? Think about it. And not saying it's true, just saying
That's
give some
maybe
critical thought to it. Think about it
right.
and really take your time, right? And and the thing is that society, as we've said for this past year, right? This past year, let alone what's happened prior, has shown in so many different ways it's not necessarily set up for you, right? Because as soon as something happens, depending on where you end up on the class, right? What part of the class kind of hierarchy or the pyramid you fall on, you'll be forgotten. They'll be like, you, we'll get back to you, right? Where people are so dependent on these things, and now we see the dependency isn't there in the time of need or in a time of crisis. This was a crisis. You didn't have money to eat. You lost your job. This was crisis. And we were depending on all these different structures to stay in place when they couldn't stay in place. They got shooken, they got shaken, and everybody has an idea of afterwards, well, we should have did this. Ain't trust me, there's gonna be something else that's gonna happen, and it's gonna do it again, right? It happens every 20 years. Something big happens and you're like, what are we gonna do, right? How do we move forward? I'm afraid, I'm scared. Every 20 years there's gonna be something. So what are you gonna do for the next one, right? For me, it was like, I need to put this mask on. I need to rap. I need to make music. I need to make beats. I need to work. I need to network. And in that, to kind of tie it in there even more, one of the producers I work with hit me with something recently because I shared about where I was at and where my mind was at. And he just shared this and he was like, yeah, a lot of times it's because we didn't set the boundary, right? I'm talking about relationships. I'm talking about how these relationships I have may come into conflict with what I want for myself. And he was like, yeah, a lot of times we don't communicate clearly our boundaries with people. And sometimes we have to re-engage and communicate what are the boundaries now, right? I'm grown, I've changed, things have moved on. He was like, what are the boundaries now? And what do I need? Because maybe what's happening is I can no longer give you what you need, and you no longer can give me what I need. Somewhere in the middle. And I'm like, yo, that's 100% true. Like, I agree, right? It's we've gone on, and I used to say this about relationships with my friends, like my friends who've been in relationships since high school or middle school. Like, we grown, we've 20 years past that. You're operating out of these boundaries that were non-existent, right? You didn't really understand what you really needed. You just kept the relationship going, not really taking into account how much the world has changed, how much you've changed. And you are playing off of rules that no longer exist, right? I was telling another friend, oh, so and so, he's still the same way. And I'm like, what you gotta realize, we was forced to be together. We're lucky if we still choose to be together. Right? When I went to school, I didn't have a choice. I was forced to the school I had to go to, and then I'm forced around to be who I'm around. We develop relationships off of this shared struggle. We're all forced to be here. After that, you start to decide what you want for yourself. Some people keep choosing to force themselves rather than maybe exploring, right? Sometimes you find that you share more in common once you're away from school, right? Than you were when you were in school, right? So these things happen, and people, what I've witnessed and experienced is people will pacify themselves to fit into something that don't work for them. They will continually do this. Me, I love working for the community, and I thought, let me see how far I can go, because I always had it in the back of my mind. It's not going to last forever due to who I am, knowing myself, being in tune with what I need,
Mm.
right? It grants me access to do certain things in certain contexts, but at a certain point, you're going to hit a glass ceiling. You have to make a choice. And me, I decided, okay, I'm going to go and venture into business for myself. It's difficult, it's hard, but I love it. I love the process. I love the struggle, because if I choose to see it differently, because it is a choice for me to love it, right? I could hate it, right? I could say I don't like it. I don't want to do all this work, but it's not going to happen. So I'm going to choose to love it. I'm going to learn to love it because I believe it's going to grant me access. If I listen to enough people, which I have had enough conversations with people who've done it their own way, there's these similarities where they changed their perception of what was going on, right? They realized, oh, I can just say something that's different than what I feel. Eventually, I'll find ways to reinforce what I'm saying. And then I feel better about it, right? It changes. Oh, I got a profit. I made money, or I found a new relationship. I developed something. And now it's fulfilling me in a way that these other things couldn't, right? I was just looking at this Vice little documentary about people in the 50s and 60s who were sharecroppers and pretty much indentured servants to these white landowners who were pretty much putting them in debt. They put them in debt for generations to keep them bound to the land, to keep them bound to working, right? Slavery ended 1800s. We talking about in the civil rights movement as the beginnings are shaping. There's people who don't even know, living in fear because why? Well, we got a house. You could get another house. Nah, we got a house, right? It's not until people find out this is going on and then someone intervenes, it stops. But most times, because I'm looking at it in the man saying, people are too afraid. They got the fear in them. They don't want to say. They don't
They
want to
got the
speak up.
fear.
They got the fear in them, right? And it's like, how many people got the fear in them? Because it just doesn't exist in the context of that, right? You don't have to be a sharecropper to and be indebted to a family for generations and decades for you to have the fear in you to prevent you from making a move or committing yourself to something. To me, I think is so important because what I've done, my job for me, regardless of who pays me, is I try my best to find out what is that thing for you and how do we move towards it? How do we make it real? How do we sustain it? And how do we get towards it? How do we move in that direction? Right? There's not a lot of people who do that, right? It's more like, well, what exists? What's there? What's available to you? What do you fit within? Right? How do you fit within this bucket? Not, no, how do I make the world fit to me? Going back to me sitting in a car, right? I can continue to react to everything that's happening around me and allow it to impact me, or I can shift my perspective and I can change how I see it. I can impact what's happening. I'm not going to react in the same way I used to react. I'm not going to follow along in the same method, in the same practice. I'm making a change. I'm committing to myself to do something differently. So I'm more authentic to my joy than I am to my agony and my pain. I'm not going to sit up here and continue to perpetuate anger, hatred, or any sense of aggression against anyone, especially if I don't know them. I don't know 9 out of 10 of these people. And that 10th person who I may know,
Mm.
it ain't no problems, right? So, what am I really putting out into the universe? Right? Am I putting out something that's going to be received with open arms? Am I putting out something that's like, oh no, we putting up our defenses and we shutting it down? Right? It's enough for me to see in the world that has gone wrong. It's enough for me to know what's been bad. Why am I going to continue to perpetuate it? Right? Because to me, in my heart and needs, I need joy. What brings me joy? Helping people reach where they want to go, connect, figure out what it is they want to do. Right? I'm all for it. I believe there's a place for everyone. I do believe that the way society works a lot of times isn't for you to think about it, it's just for you to react to it. I'm trying to have people think. I'm trying to give myself space to think because I find more joy in when I'm able to stop myself from reacting, right? Especially if I haven't trained myself to react properly, right? Think about that, reacting properly. What does that even mean, right? If you take it into the context of physicality, it's about maintaining your form under pressure. What type of pressure? If you in a fight and you got to move out of the way, it's defensive, right? It's a proper defensive technique. If you train yourself to react, it becomes instinctual. But if your instincts are based out of something that's already corrupt or already not based in a skill set, it's just based off of emotions without any direction, without any craftsmanship, then you ain't doing nothing,
It's like being in a
right?
mixed martial arts fight and they try to take you down and you can't sprawl because you ain't got no technique. Be like, oh well, I'm strong and I
I'm
can
strong,
punch
I'm
you.
just gonna beast up.
But if they get you on the ground, you done for.
You done, right? And that's the thing. When you say all that, when you were talking about people who like, oh, let me just go with this, right? Let me just go with that. Oh, what does society have for me? What does the world have for me? Instead of I'm gonna make what I need in the world. I'm not saying everybody can do it, but I know a lot of y'all. I didn't have conversations with y'all, and y'all quick to pivot and y'all quick to shift. Y'all quick to be like, oh, well, you see, I'm really happy. You don't even sound happy. You say that with so much aggression and angst that you really are bitter. You sound bitter right now, right? You come across bitter. You're not, your communication is not, yeah, I'm happy. You can't tell. No, I can't tell because you say it with so much aggression. You say it with so much agony in your voice, right? Because when we talked before, you told me what your dreams were. You told me what your goals were. And now you subverted that. You've changed that. You've altered that. Because why? You started to pacify yourself. You found the things to prevent you from pushing yourself forward. And then you said, oh, what? I'm going to accept this. But you don't accept it because you keep pacifying yourself, right? I'm speaking to people who I know, and it's not just one, there's
Yeah.
multiple, right? Because I
Oh yeah.
remember the dreams. I remember what you said you wanted. I remember the late nights when we were sitting down and we was just talking and we said, this is what we want for ourselves in the future. I'm still going for it. You done sat up here and said, nah, I'm happy. I'm happy. You can't tell I'm happy.
You know
You
what?
don't.
You know, it's like if you're listening right now, or you're watching live on YouTube Live, Twitch TV, um, Twitch TV, twitch.tv/ what lyrical opposition /lyrical opposition, or Facebook Live if y'all listening, right? Put your hands up if you had a dream and you shifted, right? It's like we all been there, right? We all guilty of it, and right, sometimes we outlive those dreams. Sometimes those dreams stay with us. Sometimes we never realize them, and right, turning those dreams to goals, right, takes a significant amount of effort and energy and practice and intentionality, right? It's like, yes, you can say you're happy and right and not ring true, right? It's like people are like, oh, fake it till you make it. But a lot of times when you're happy, right, your joy shows up in the kindness, right? It shows up in your generosity, right? It shows up in fairness, right? It shows up in respect for others, right? When you're happy, it shows up in certain ways, right? It's not just like you don't necessarily need to tell people you're happy for people to know that you are. Um, but when you say, well, I have this dream, right? Even if you don't say it, right? Sometimes we come across this dream, and if you really want to make it a goal, then there has to be some discipline in there, right? Where you're making choices in that direction. And it has to be, right, some practice, right, in making those decisions, right? And sometimes to get practice, right, you need help. And if you're not looking, right, the people around you to be resources, like the people that you have relationship with that may be friends for help, you look to, like, people sometimes look to, right, self-help books, right? Sometimes people, you know, watch something like our podcast, this video, or listen to this podcast, right? People are looking for information, trying to acquire help, And that help can be great, that support can be great, but that support doesn't do much without the commitment, right? So like you have a self-help book, but like you said, if you don't apply nothing, right, then your support won't get you that far, right? Because the support can get you to a consistency, right? Like without that commitment, right, then there's a lot of resources and information and without application, right? Say, oh well, I understand this concept, or I understand this concept, or I went to this, I listened to this TED talk, or I went to this hear this person speak, and they really dropped some gems, and your commitment has to show up when you're listening, and it has to show up then when you're processing that information, right? The commitment has to be there so that you can say, well, I got this support, right? I pulled these resources together, right? I spent my money and did this, or I spent my money and took this course, and right, that's your support. And now where is your consistency, right? Where's the choices that you're making and saying, okay, I can make a choice now to move in the direction of my dream. And a lot of times, right, people don't like they fall somewhere, right? When they make that pivot, right? Sometimes it's not right. Sometimes it's not the commitment, right? Sometimes they were committed and didn't get the support, right? Sometimes, right, they were supported and didn't have a commitment, right? Sometimes they had support and were committed and like couldn't find the consistency, right? Because either the commitment wasn't consistent or the support wasn't consistent. And right, people want to fault other people when like the support is not there, but it's on us to be like on it's on the self to say, well, these are my resources and I can't pull and drain from one person. I can pull and drain from resource, right? Like when folks say diversify, right? It's it's a meant to say, well, if you stay pulling from this well, it's gonna dry up, right? So it has to be some sustainability in right pulling from your resources.
I mean, sustainability, right? The key point of sustainability is that it's the continuous persistence, right? That consistency, right? It's just able to consist, it's able to go on. Sustainability. It doesn't look the same for everybody. It doesn't look the same
True,
for other people, right? You
true.
have to figure out what's sustainability for you, right? I could look to my peers and be like, oh, they have a team or
Okay.
they have XYZ, right? Or they got this. Now, one, am I really looking for that? Do I
Mm,
really need it? How much can I do on my own? I'm the type of person where I'll play every role in every position for everyone else. I'll do that, right? For myself, I've learned over time that I have such a distinct vision that there's not a lot of people that I can rely on or trust to help me execute that vision. So a lot of times it requires me to dive deeper on how can I learn to execute on what I want, right? And I enjoy that for myself,
right.
right?
It
I
energizes
remember
you.
I got a boy who's like, "Oh, I'll be your manager." And I'm like, "Do you want to be my manager because you want to help manage what I got going on, or do you want to be
You
my
want to help
manager
me,
because you
right?
you see what's potentially going to happen and you
Right. Do
want to
you
be
want
a
to help
part
me
of that?"
execute it or not?
Yeah, right. And it's like when I get right, this connects to everything. When I get self-limiting beliefs, when I get
Right.
self-limiting beliefs,
Right.
automatically I'm turned off because I cannot limit myself. I cannot limit myself. I could never. How could I limit myself? I'm alive. I'm alive. I have the ability to do something. I'm supposed to now say, "Oh, I can't do that. Oh, I don't know how." I'm gonna go figure it out. I can find out. I have the means of the internet. So many things I've learned in this past year were from me just trying something out. Right? I was like, "Oh, I need an album. I need an album cover. I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna figure out a way. I'm gonna make it happen. I'm gonna just keep. I'm gonna keep going till I find what I'm looking for. Okay, good. I got what I want. Right? I need to do a video. All right, I'm gonna just figure out a way to use the tools I have access to do what I want. I can't sit up here and say I can't do something. I haven't done it yet. Right. But I got people who be like, oh, yeah, I want to help you. All right. Can you do this? Oh, man, I don't really know how. Can you help me? If you're supposed to help me, you can't come back around and say, I need your help. You said you want to help me. Figure
But
it
it
out.
right, but
Now,
it all
again,
depends, right? It all
now
depends on
I was
the
going to say,
intention, right? The
not only
intention
just
for
the intention, knowing yourself, right? Are
yeah.
you a person who sees the allure of someone who's been able to generate or create something on their own, and you just see the outcome, but you don't want to take
Ooh,
into account the journey, the process, the practice,
right.
right? You see what comes from it, and you want that, but you don't want to deal with all the other things that come with it, right? Now, me on the other hand, I'm like, if I got to sweep today, I'm gonna sweep the best sweep I can ever sweep. Some people that I know, they like, I ain't trying to sweep. Okay, that's cool. Don't. But don't ask me, hey, how come you got access to this building now? Because I swept the floors, right? And that's happened many times. How'd you get
Oh yeah.
keys to this? Because I swept the floors.
So many keys.
Like literally swept the floors.
I have so many keys. I have so many keys that so much access, and it's sometimes it's just saying yes and making myself available, right? And my thought process was like, even if right, I'm not confident or I'm inexperienced, right? I could say if I say yes, right, because I'm being asked. If I say yes, then all I can do is fail, right? Right. At the least I can fail. And at the most, right, I get access, right? Maybe even ownership, right? I get opportunity, right? I get a resource, right? I get multiple resources, right? I get something, right, that's lasting. But if I don't say yes, right, somebody else will. But again, right, like you said, it's knowing yourself. It's like, okay, well, what's my bandwidth, right? Who am I? And is self-starting the thing that I want to do, or do I need to find a system, right? Do I need to jump into a system, right? It's like, do I want to be a system quarterback? Do I want to be a game manager? Do I want to be a dynamic player? Right? It's like you could be an all pro at at any of those styles, right? You could still be a system quarterback and get to the Pro Bowl. You could still be a game manager and make it to the Super Bowl. You could be a dynamic quarterback and miss the playoffs, right? But it's just a matter of like knowing, say, this is going to work for me. And right, sometimes you can't foresee that, but if you don't say yes and try and fail, then you won't know that those opportunities when they come, right? You won't know that they're a thing, right? That they're possible, right? So like when people say fail fast, I think we started in the beginning of the podcast. We talked about failing fast, and right, it's like taking that opportunity to miss, right? Taking that opportunity to swing and miss. Like when you do that, you say, okay, well, switching to baseball now, it's like, that's not my pitch, right? I remember watching, it's funny. So I remember watching 49ers. We here in the Bay Area. I remember watching the 49ers while watching Colin Kaepernick play. And, right, Colin Kaepernick's having a great season. It's 2011, 2012 season. And he is running the ball, making passes, some few passes on the run, a lot of like dynamic, fast moving balls, some deep balls. Um, but there's like these always these little things about the way he passed the ball that my siblings and I were very critical of, right? Like like throwing behind the receiver, so like receivers couldn't get a lot of yards after the catch, um, where the receiver had to like slow down on crossing patterns, like posts or arrow routes, like things coming across the middle, slant sometimes, right? They would hit the target but not be the bullseye, right? So it's like a 60% hit on the target, right? So you make the catch, you get the yards, but it's like another 40%, right? If you throw it ahead of the receiver, right, the potential is even greater. And so like we were watching, and he would always struggle with the fade pass, right? This touch pass, right? It takes a little bit of finesse to throw the fade route. And when it was great throughout the year because right, like if as a quarterback, if you're 70, 80, 90% accurate, right? You're amazing. Right. So as long as you're like keeping your passes low, you running the ball, getting your team down, converting on third downs, right? You're doing great. You go win games. But regularly he would miss these fade routes. And so we get to the Super Bowl. It's the fourth quarter. Frank Gore has a long run. We in the red zone, in the 10-yard line, at the goal line. And they want to run a fade route to Michael Crabtree, right? They want to pass this fade route. And they go for it, the fade route from different positions, throw it to the outside, right? The fade route is just like a little inside, is you either inside release, then quickly move outside, or you outside release right away. But a lot of times the DB is going to play the receiver inside and use the boundary or the sideline as an extra defender. And they go for the fade route 4 times, right? It's like literally the coach knows, the quarterback knows, the offensive coordinator knows, the receivers know that this guy can't throw this pass. But they try because statistically across the league, it's a great pass. You got one-on-one coverage, and you just ask your receiver to beat the guy, right? But it's a team game. So the quarterback has to deliver that ball to the guy. So even if the DB is beat, the ball's got to get there. But everybody knows that this is the one pass, right? This guy can't throw, right? So somebody's got to say, we got to do something different. But nobody did, right? Four downs in the 10-yard line, within the 10-yard line, inside the 5, 4 downs, right? No score, right? It happens.
Well,
But
hold
it comes
on.
back. Go
You
ahead.
said everybody knows. Not everybody knew.
Nah, they knew, right? Because they got the numbers.
No, 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 no,
Because
no. You can have the numbers and you can ignore the numbers.
right, but the numbers are there, right? That everybody's got the evidence, right? Everybody had the evidence, right? The evidence was available to everyone. The game tape, the stats, right? They got jobs where they just put together the stats on put every single type of route and throw and how often it was completed.
Because I'm just saying, like, we all in the
But you
same class or we all on the same team. Don't mean we all know the same thing.
right, or like you said, we in the same class, and not everybody's paying attention to the number, right? To what's on the board, right? Everybody's processing the things differently, right? The stats differently. That's for real, right? So like, and then actually saying, right, okay, I know I haven't been able to complete this, but I'm going to try anyway, right? I know, right, that I haven't been able to do this, but I'm gonna try anyway. I'm gonna go with what they called, right? And so that's like the difference between being a system quarterback, right, and a dynamic player. Like there's at some point, right, you have to make a decision and say, this is what works for me. This is what hasn't worked for me, right? And I need to innovate or move differently where I've seen myself fail, right? Or I see myself come short, so I gotta move differently, right? I have to
Put that
make a
work
shift,
in.
right? Right, and so like the pivot is not always bad, but again, right, that intention, right, for the pivot is gotta be more about what's happening, right? Being honest with self instead of like, oh, I can't scapegoat the next person, right, because it didn't work out. If I'm a pivot, right, I still have to be It still has to be a pivot, a shift in the same direction.
Yeah, and also pay attention to your like okay, there's two big threads in this that you highlighted. One is knowing yourself, right? Knowing yourself in a situation and then your response to what's going on around you, right? Because we're talking about it's about that difference between intention and then execution, right? Your intention behind something, and then what because it really comes into that self advocacy. That's the one part. The second
Yeah.
part is who's around you, who is your team, and if you're gonna have these people around you, how do you support and reciprocate the bonds and the trust and the communication that goes into it, right? Because it's not like we talk about a game with people in it, but we don't talk about the people and who they are in their lives and everything that impacts them going into the game. The same
Right.
thing goes for a job, the same thing goes for everything. I know it's easy for people to say, nah, I don't bring my personal stuff with me to work. At some point, it's there because you're there. Like the biggest lie that has been perpetuated through time is that it's separate. Whether it's
Mm.
a little or a lot, it's there, right? That little needle or that huge gigantic ship of a problem is still there, right? Whether you choose to identify it or not. And then if you're in a team and you're working with others, are you attentive to that? Are you going to be mindful of it? Are you going to help or are you going to harm? Right? Are you going to be a person that's going to be aware of, well, my teammate or my team member or my colleague or my friend, I know that they're sensitive about this, right? And sensitive isn't about a weakness. It just means for them, that nerve is a little bit more exposed for that one thing. Are you going to be the type of person who's a colleague, a friend, or a support or a part of a team to say, regardless of how you feel, I need you to show up because I'm going to do what I want to do, regardless of how it makes you feel, right?
Mm.
Because a lot of times,
That's
what
heavy.
happens is we just think, oh, what I need you for is in this moment. Everything that happens outside of it don't matter. No, my actions outside of this moment may come to reflect back on the group. It may come back to reflect on the team, right? Because people all the time will look at what we see, but we don't always have put that work in. Alice Wonders on Twitch, put that work in. You got to put that work in. But more importantly, when you put that work in, are you doing it with a level of thoughtfulness, right? Because you can be skillful,
Right.
but you still
Grinding.
lack the personal people skills, right?
Right.
To develop the relationships needed for everyone to operate and function as a whole unit, right? Because that can come into football, that can come into computers, that can come into any aspect of life. If you don't have the ability to discern between, well, the attention's on me, I can do what I want. No, you can't.
Now
Because
we
if it
all
impacts
gotta do
somebody
it. We
else,
all gotta
right?
win.
Yeah, we got to win together. And I got to want to see you in and outside of what it is that we're doing, right? You hurting right now? Is there a relationship that's bothering you? Is there something going on that am I adding to the stress? Am I getting involved in ways I shouldn't be getting involved, or am I getting involved in a way that's helping you, right? Am I maintaining and respecting the boundaries that exist, or am I now encroaching on space, right?
Right. Because
Am
like
I now
transactional, right, can be healthy if it's an understood boundary.
because
Right.
what
It's
you
like,
don't want to do
yeah,
is you don't want to be the one who I need you to be here with me, but when we not together here, I'm gonna do things against you that are gonna hurt you,
right.
right? Because that happens. That happened, right? That's things that people don't
It's
really take into
happening.
account.
It's happening.
It continues to happen. It's still going on, right? It's easy to see things and be like, "Oh, that's in the context of this moment moving forward, it's great." But how did it start? How did we get here? A lot of times we don't ask those questions, right? We don't ask those questions because it's easier to look at what's happening now and just say that's what it is versus saying where did this stem from, right? You not having the belief or the determination, or you just not having the ability to have that discipline to say I'm going to be this person for myself to reach what I need to reach. I'm a I'm a believer there is a way to everything, But you have to be mindful. Water will freeze at a certain temperature. If you don't plan for that, you will get stuck, right? You think because what you know water as, that's what it is. But the further
Well,
you
it's
get
water.
away from where you are, water changes drastically, right?
That's good though. That's good though. The further we get from our familiarity, right? The further we get from our comfort zone, right? You have to expect things to be different as well, right? There's going to be some things that like you don't necessarily know the way they work, right? So when you in that situation, right, you got to open up to understanding the situation as it is, right? Not how you preconceive it to be, or a situation that may seem similar that may resonate with you. Nah, the situation is different, right? The environment is different. Like where you are now is different, and you got to say, well, actually, I never been here before. I'm not lost, but the water's flowing differently.
I mean, did you take that because you love to do it, or did you take it because it paid? Right? Think about it on every level. Think about it on every level because it really like
I know
did
my
it pay
answer.
well? Right? Did it pay? Did it? Is it because it paid well? Right? Because if it paid well, right, then okay, you get what you need out of it and you move on. If it's what you love to do, if you're attentive to it, you can find ways to be paid well doing it. But you have to be mindful of what are some of the things that may be required of you to put more into to see that happen. Because I just think about people who, oh yeah, I got into this to pay off this. I got into this to get the pay for that, right? And when they get into it, oh no, I always love doing this. And then as soon as it reached its climax, and it's like, oh, I'm gone again, right? And it's like now someone's gonna hear just that one moment, not the prior, not the after. They're just gonna hear that one moment. Oh, I love to do this, and I'm like, maybe I love to do it too because I know it's gonna pay, right? But as soon as oh, I hated it. Nah, I mean, it was necessary for the moment. I needed it for that time. It worked for that moment. But as soon as it's over, it's like you don't have no association. As a matter of fact, you want to distance yourself. You want to rebrand yourself. You want to have people know you and associate you with different things.
Oh, you talk about people now. You talking about real life stuff, man. Hold, hold on. We got
There's
we got
nothing wrong with anybody deciding to do whatever they want to do. Do what you want to do by all means. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's something wrong when you put out a false image. Let's own it. Let's own it. I'm doing this purely for economical financial gain. That's okay. Don't put out the belief that for some strange reason you also need to love what it is that you do because that's not the truth. Because what happens is
sometimes. Go ahead. Go ahead.
sometimes what happens is people see that and then they latch onto it thinking it's true and then they go through the same journey you went through with the same outcomes instead of realizing if I would have maybe I wouldn't have spent as much time doing this. Maybe I wouldn't have put more maybe I wouldn't have been as reckless with what I got from this if I knew that there was no love involved, right?
And people do that with people.
I mean, you said it, not me.
Pe- people do that with people, right? It don't be about money. Sometimes it's about money, but it don't be about money, right? But it's this thing like, are you doing this right because you want something out of it, right? Or are you doing something to give something out of it, right? And it's like, okay, you want to get right, you want reciprocity. I get it, right? But are you in a business of giving and serving, right? Are you in a mindset to like to serve somebody and help them like level up while getting what you say you need, right? Because like, I'll be like, oh man, I'm getting all my needs. I'm great. Like people say, oh well, how you doing in this friendship? How you doing in this relationship? Well, I'm getting all my needs. But what about so and so's needs, right? So what about like growth, right? What about the high school friendship, right? The middle school friendship, right? thinking they got the same boundaries, right? And say using a person for the same or interacting with a person with the same expectation, right? To have their needs met, have your needs met, and really they like this ain't who we are no more, right? We got to pivot, we got to shift, right? Create new boundaries, right? Then boundaries ain't got to be harmful. Matter of fact, boundaries can be about independence and about growth, but folks got to have that talk and that openness, right? And say, oh, okay, well, maybe you're not trying to throw shade. Okay, maybe you not trying to slight me. Okay, maybe you you're not trying to discard me. You actually want to see me level up, and I don't actually have healthy boundaries that is protecting both of us.
I don't
Right?
have the skills to communicate.
Because the job won't protect you. The job will say, okay, we got somebody younger and less expensive. We hope you enjoy your retirement, or
We got
this
somebody.
pension, this pension. We can always, add to our labor force after you gone.
Oh yeah, because people still think that people are disposable. You're not disposable. It's just there's people who think you are disposable. Please know the difference. You're not disposable, but you
You're
will come
not.
across people who think you're disposable. So please keep that in mind, right? Because I mean, I've had to remind people I'm not disposable, right?
Right.
When I decide to go, some things some things aren't the same, and I can say that about every job I've ever been in. As soon as I leave, it ain't gonna be the same, and
I
it's
can say that
known.
about every room I've been in.
It's never gonna be the same. I mean, it's so true because I thought about it. I was like, I was communicating like, they're
Like
like,
this.
what are the issues? And I'm like, oh, people think that we're disposable when we're not. Like the position may stay be there, but how that position exists is all dependent on the person that you have. And until you can have some cohesiveness or coexist between those two parallels, right? One end is the position and the role, on the other end is the person who fills the role that makes the difference, right? And I remember I was like, let me think. And I thought about every job I had. And I'm like, man, every time I left a job, it was never the same, right?
Facts.
I did something someone else didn't do, right? I provided a service or I did something in a way that someone else couldn't fill them shoes, right? And it's not to dismiss that what they did next, because it just meant it was different. It was different because it was a new person, right?
Yeah.
So to me, when you are in this situation, because I mean, what it comes down to, right? Think about it like this: what is helpful, what is harmful, right? Self advocacy, if you know how to engage and communicate from self, it can be helpful, right? If you're operating out of pain and you're not being aware of how your pain is now impacting your decisions, your self advocacy can be now harmful, right? It can be helpful if someone is speaking up and advocating for you, but if they get lost in the sauce and they take too much or they start to distort, then it's harmful, right? You'll have people who need support or need someone to speak on their behalf, but you also have to be willing to listen. And at the same time, you have to sometimes speak up for yourself, but you have to engage with yourself and know yourself to know what it is you're really asking for, right? Because everything that we talked about, right? As much as it is about what you decide to do and who you decide to be, is also about, is your decisions impacting others negatively and harming others,
Right.
right? I can recall in my multitude of experiences people who pacified, again, going back to pacification. I'm going to consume this substance that's going to alter who I am because I don't like my job. I've been through trauma. I'm not I'm not expressing myself in my relationship in an authentic and responsible and healthy way. So I've now intoxicated myself with this substance, and who gets impacted? Maybe it's my partner, maybe it's my family, maybe it's my child, right? We don't always see it because it's the routine, right? What this got me through the night to get me back to the next day, right? And I get that. That's sustainable for what you got right now, but eventually, from my experiences and what I've seen, those children or those people, things get to a point where, well, now we need to communicate and do things differently because it's wearing on me. It works for you, but it doesn't work for me, right? And I'm not to shame or to take away from what someone is going through, but you really have to figure out what is it that you need. How do you break that cycle, that routine that may be sustainable for you, but isn't sustainable for the people around you, right? That may be causing harm to the people around you, and in some way may be causing harm to yourself because maybe it's not a substance, maybe it's your behavior, right? Maybe it's your aggression, maybe it's your anger, right? Maybe it's not that. Maybe it's your sadness. Maybe it's you not being able to communicate and advocate for yourself, right? Maybe it's something that's going on where it's like, I'm going to consume myself with something, or I'm going to consume something to give me a sense of gratification or fulfillment that isn't sustainable, right? It's just for the moment. And that moment, I'm going to try and reach again tomorrow, right? And I'm speaking from the experiences that I've had and what I share with people that I know in my community and that I have within my relationships. Because as much as I may be there for others, because I definitely was, like, kid you not, there for others, still there for others, it's important for us to be there for ourselves. It's important
Yeah.
for us to be aware of how to be there for ourselves, right? To self soothe, as they say, right? To comfort yourself, to love yourself, because it's important due to the fact that I'm living life. I've lived. I continue to live. I'm going to continue to grow, and I'm going to do what I can to support those around me. But in this conversation, the potential for harm is so great. And we lose sight of that because we think, oh, well, we're living in harm, but we don't always see it, right? We're just living. We don't see that we're living in harm, right? Oh, I'm paying the bills. You paying the bills, and you paying the bills in harm, right? I'm taking care of my responsibilities, but you taking care of your responsibilities in a harmful way. And I'm here to be the one to be like, hey, maybe we should reevaluate, rethink. We should look at it with a little bit of the scrutiny to be like, well, what are we really doing?
Right.
Because is this helpful or is this harmful? And for some people, hey, I get it. You got it. You don't want to change. But for some people, you want to. And I'm telling you, there's so many different methods and means. Okay, yes, we're coming from the place of San Francisco, but you also have the means, if you're listening to this, to reach out to people and to get to know people. And yes, it that can be a trial and error situation that can be super toxic or it could be super overwhelming. I'm saying here is a place to start, right? Lyrical Ones is a place to start. You can get connected with us. We have a network that branches out. Someone knows somebody that you need, right? Or someone knows somebody that needs you, right? That's where it really comes from. Taking that leap of faith to just say, you know what, I'm gonna take a chance to get to know somebody else, look for the resource, and try to contact that resource, whatever the resource is. Is it mental health services? Is it therapy? Right? Not all therapy got to be the same. It ain't all sit down and talk. Sometimes it's just spending time with somebody who you care about and that you like and you just need to communicate with. Maybe it's about developing what are the different communication styles and how am I incorporating them. Maybe you need to look up what's passive aggressive forms of communication. What's assertive forms of communication? What's healthy communication look like? Take the time and just venture, right? Alpha was said, is it a self-help book or is it building the network around you? Is it hearing that person talk or is it finding a way to connect? But take that leap of faith because I'm telling you because I've done it. I'm telling you because I've gone through it. I'm telling you because I continue to learn from my experiences and I've benefited from whatever leverage point I've had, right? Whether it was really me sitting in a place of privilege or whether it was sitting me in a place of disadvantage, adversity, I've had enough to see on both ends to know you have the opportunity and the ability to do something to change it, to change whatever it is. And it's important to think about it because I'm just seeing right now, yeah, like the potential for harm, let alone the harm that's going on, is so great, is so frequent. And I think that, it's just it's important for people to take that time that if you don't get the intervention from this, intervene for yourself, right?
Mm.
Make that switch, make that pivot, right? Give love, be loved. Don't act out of a sense of I need you to do. You know what? I need from you. And if you can't give it, then okay, I gotta let you go. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. But sometimes that's what we have to do, right? We have to do it for ourselves, right? In order to love, you need to know what love is for you. In order for you to communicate, you need to know what the communication needs are for yourself. So, it's just, it's something that is always going to be relevant, prevalent, and I'm hoping people can get peace out of it. Affluent. What about you? What are your thoughts on the potential for harm?
It's not what you do, right? It's how you do it. Um, and I agree that it's like you think about your needs, they exist outside of relationship, right? They exist whether you're in community or not. You have needs. Now, within community, there's another set of needs, and you have to acknowledge what those are. And that community can be family, it can it can be acquaintances, it can be work, it can be with a partner, it can be in the community of Earth, right? Like a community of culture, right? It can be social media, but you got to acknowledge what those needs are, for you, right? Like, oh, what are my social media needs? Oh, well, damn, right? Like, I need to like encourage people. I need to like support my people's pages, people I don't know, like they 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 vocational things. Like, I need to like put their stuff in the collection or like comment on their stuff, right? Or I need likes or I need exposure. I need people to look at my stories. I need to like vote on these polls, like whatever it is. Like you say, right? It's like which wolf do you feed, right? Is it's really important to, to acknowledge what those needs are, right? The vocation of things, right? It's like how do you make it happen, right? How do you do it? And um, yeah, so it's a I think it's a good thing to examine for self, and it's a great thing to examine for humanity. Um, as we take small communities and lift each other up and build up and learn from each other. Um, because really, just like there is so much harm that can be done when we, get on the runaway train of reaction and, how is something making me feel without putting, our thoughts and hearts into someone else's shoes and, finding that empathy. And then also like saying, right, this is not what I meant to do, right? When you misstep or respond wrong, right? This is not, right? Not just blaming, someone else for your response, but saying, actually, I did this wrong. And I'm learning that all the time. It's like, yeah, I did that wrong. I I responded wrong, and right, it's like people gonna forgive or you're not gonna forgive. Like people go to apologize, like apologizing, right? Don't change nothing for nobody, right? Make somebody feel seen and acknowledged sometimes, but you still got to work through what happens after the apology, right? Still got to work through the feelings and what happened in the aftermath, even if somebody's been comforted by an apology. Like sometimes people take apologies as an insult, right? It's like if you were sorry, then you wouldn't have done it in the first place, right? It's like all these like politicians. Who is this? Kevin Durant just apologized to Michael Rappaport for his offensive remarks. Um, it's like you knew what you were saying. You got 3 and 4 burner Twitter accounts. You knew what you was doing. You know what words do. You know what English is and how to use it to harm. And that was your intention. Like to publicly say, "Oh, I'm sorry." If you were sorry, you wouldn't have done it, right? It's like you meant to bring harm, right? And this was like potentially, right? We can all use words as right combat tools, right? We can all use right them as war weapons, right? Especially like when it comes to saying we're aligned or allied with folks when we may or may not be, right? It's like to say, well, I advocate for this. I want to see these folks do that. Okay, that's cool for your social media needs, right? That you look a certain way. But who are the folks that you know that you come to understand better or that you have come to lift up and advocate for within your capacity, within your bandwidth, right? Is there an opportunity to support that you are not taking a shot at? And what does that look like in your conversations with your people, in your language, and your not tolerance, right, but acceptance of opinions that are different than yours, right? The words can like be a great veil and have no substance behind them. So I just want folks to, take their language seriously, and if you're gonna use dangerous words, you know, be dangerous for the good of people, not to be complicit with what's harming them.
And I feel you. I just want to add on. You can be sorry. You can be. You can be because rich people hurt too. Rich just because you got money, like we associate money with some form of like they got to figure it out. No, 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 no. They did something. They were compensated for it. We live in a country that rewards people for what they're able to create or what they're able to do. And if you're able to do something in a form of entertainment, we'll pay you even more. So, this athlete speaking to an actor decided to say some really mean, messed up stuff. Now, to me, I'm looking at it as this person obviously is hurting because this is consuming their mind, or they've been hurt and they want to hurt back. Whatever the case may be, right? I'm going to learn from it to where, like you said, I know what these words mean, I know what they can do.
Right.
So I'm going to go talk to my friend offline, away from any form of being observed, other than someone who knows me and can receive it to
Right.
just get it off my chest. Versus
Mm-hmm.
using a public platform where there's no context, no understanding of who you really are, right? We know what you can do, we know what you're capable of, but we don't know you. I don't know any of these people. I don't know you, but I do know what you said hurts, right? Maybe I need to say some hurtful things, but I need to say it in a safe space, right? Maybe I need to go to the gun range and let off a couple rounds. I don't need to let off no rounds into nobody. I don't, right? And that's the thing. Can you just find a way to get it out without harming anyone?
Right.
So I mean, I'm gonna leave it on this. There's two brothers. One is named Dave. One is named Eli. Dave is very ambiguous. He's open to whatever the world tells him, right? People tell him stuff, and his reaction is kind of like, whatever. And there's Eli, right? Eli takes what people says and holds on to every word. Which wolf do you feed, right? Dave and Eli are brothers. They're twins. Eli believes he's inferior, but in reality is superior. But because he believes he's inferior, he operates out of this inferiority. Whereas Dave doesn't care. Dave doesn't hold on to whether he's superior or inferior. Eli becomes consumed with that thought that he was given to the point that he wants to kill his brother because he can't stand the thought of him being superior. But what happens? Dave defends himself and ends up killing Eli just out of defending himself. What happens? Eli is the superior brother, but because of what he believed and his consumed nature, he's consumed with the thought. He tries to kill his brother, and his brother, knowing that he has no other way to get around this, he kills his brother. But he's the inferior one. But he never really cared about being superior or inferior to begin with, right? So, which wolf do you feed? Do you feed the one that's trying to kill you? Or do you feed the one that's just trying to be present and take it all in? Really think about it. Because Dave and Eli, I mean, Dave eventually dies too. It's just he didn't die when Eli tried to kill him.
Right.
Right? So,
And and like you said, right, the phrase is, right, whether you believe you can or you can't, right, you're right. So if you believe that inferiority, right, then you're right. Right? If you believe that it doesn't matter, right, then it doesn't. You know, but it's all about the energy and what energy you put into one or the other. And right, that takes a lot of practice, right? But you get to practice all the time. You get to practice all the time, right? Believing that you can or you can't. You get to practice all the time acknowledging or deciding whether being better or worse or being more than or less than is important to you. You get to decide, you get to practice all the time what's important to you, right? In your thought, in your practices, and your choices. You get to practice, you get to train this perspective of yourself and your worldview. You get to train it all the time. You can look at things differently every day.
ain't that the truth? Well, on that, I'm going to leave it right there. Episode 43 of the Lyrical Ones podcast. People figure out what you need to do for yourselves. Take care of yourselves. Love yourselves. And as let's
And
finish
love
this
people.
time. Yeah.
Love people. Ooh, that sounds nice. I see what you did there.
Like my thumb just hovered over it. It happened. So,
One, 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 one.